So I recently attended the Suits and Sneakers main event at the Tryst, hosted by Mr. Mark Sham and his amazing team. And honestly, every time I come back here, it feels like they just leveling up. Maybe you couldn't attend because you were working during the day. Maybe it was your granny's birthday. And you had to be someone else that evening. Whatever the reason, hopefully I can share a little bit of what I experienced and you can take some of the learning from it as well. First up was Brent Lindeque, the good things guy. Brent describes himself as basically an average Joe who became a famous average Joe. And it all started with one simple act of kindness that he documented, uploaded to YouTube, and it eventually sparked a much bigger movement. Today, the good things guy deliberately looks for the positive stories that's happening in South Africa. And I love that because, we live in a world where negativity gets amplified. If you're constantly consuming that negativity, you can very easily start believing that everything in South Africa is broken. And Brent reminded me that even when things feel chaotic and dark, there's almost always a good news story somewhere. Next was Eric Kruger, who I've heard speak before. Eric is incredibly thoughtful in the way that he communicates. And one line from him really hit me. It was that everything you want is on the other side of change. And I felt that because I've experienced a lot of change myself over this last year. I want to grow, I want to improve, I want my business to succeed. But you can't necessarily become the person that's capable of achieving those things while remaining the same person that you were before. Rapelang Rabana then spoke about learning and how we go about learning. One of the things that I found fascinating was the difference between what we learn and how we learn. Now, our education system often concentrates heavily on the what, the facts, the information, the content. But how we learn often happens in a sweet spot that's specific usually to you and your style of learning. And she said something that I think applies far beyond education. She said that her success, or success in general, is largely linked to your ability to stay in the discomfort. She related this to entrepreneurship. She said that she knew that some people don't necessarily leave entrepreneurship because they're incapable. They leave because the discomfort just becomes too much for too long, and there are easier places for them to find the reward and validation that they want. And that one definitely stayed with me as I'm in this season of entrepreneurship now. Mark then hosted a panel with Nick Dreyer and Murray Clark. Nick is the founder of Made in RSA, and he helps South African business get locally produced products into international markets. And I loved how strongly he advocated for South African made products, because we actually produce some incredible things in this country. But we also place an emphasis on things that are from abroad, have a better quality, at least in our minds. It's this mindset that South Africans have. Then there was Murray Clark from Neighbor Good. Now, I followed Murray's content on LinkedIn for some time, particularly the work that he's doing with property and creating new living and working spaces. And what stood out to me from his talk was how hands-on he still is. These are significant projects that he's involved in, there's tens and millions of rands, but he's still picking up the phone, he's still speaking to people, he's still getting involved in the detail when something needs to move forward, whether it's in Cape Town or in San Francisco, he's pushing ahead with it. Then came Ian Fuhr, the founder of Sorbet, and Ian's story was crazy. The first person I thought about while listening to him was Richard Branson of Virgin. Just this serial entrepreneur that's jumping into business. It's figuring things out and making things work. Ian's story felt like the South African entrepreneurial version of that. He's building businesses during apartheid. He's going into townships. He's working in music. He's starting a music label, and Yuma Sekela enters the story. And then he goes to America and he's signing people over there. And then while he's over there, he encounters Whitney Houston before she becomes the big Whitney Houston that we know. And eventually, he built Sorbet. And underneath all of those incredible stories was something that I really liked. It was much deeper. Ian spoke openly about race, apartheid, and the lessons that he learned from his own employees. And eventually that fed into his philosophy around Sorbet, and his emphasis was very simple. He focused on doing things exceptionally well. He was focusing on the customer, on the people, on the employees, and the money would then flow from that But you know, listening to him honestly felt like sitting with an uncle who has lived an unbelievable life and is now sharing his war stories with you. Me and the audience, I think we were gripped for the full hour. There was then a panel that was looking at business and the South African economy from a few different perspectives. There was Grace Harding, who was from Ocean Basket, and she was incredibly candid. I loved her honesty. There was no fluff. She spoke how she would just identify a problem and give very practical ways of looking at it. And one thing that stood out for me was the emphasis on people, and how something we might take for granted in South Africa is how our employees should be treated doesn't necessarily translate automatically when you expand into other countries. Then there was Tsepo, the founder of Tsepo Jeans, and he came back to something we already heard. It was about customer experience. So he shared how even though he might have a relatively small retail footprint, people would come back to him because of the quality of the service and how the brand makes them feel and how they felt by being treated by Tsepo and his employees. And I love how connected he remains to where he came from and how his success gives other young people an example of what's possible. Alan Reyes from Race Corp reminded us, or at least me, that you never really graduate from needing help. Despite everything that he's built, he still has mentors. He still gets stuck. He still phones people when he doesn't know what to do. And again, that word came up, collaboration. And none of us really built anything completely alone. Other people had helped to open up doors for him. Then Rich Mulholland brought his Scottish energy to the stage. And his challenge was that you need to be the smartest person in the room at one thing at least. Not everything, just one thing. That's what gives you the expertise, that's what gives you the authority. And he also spoke about energy, that the audience that you're speaking to, whoever it is, can't bring more energy than what you're bringing to them. And that really challenged me. So whether I'm speaking to a prospective customer, I'm presenting to a group, or even preaching at church, I have a responsibility for the energy that I'm bringing into the room, to the enthusiasm that I'm bringing in there. And the stage doesn't need to be some massive auditorium. It could be a boardroom. It could be the team meeting, that we're in, or the church. It could even just be a presentation that you do to your boss. And this video is actually part of that journey for me. One of the reasons I deliberately record these videos like this is because I want to become more comfortable communicating. I've put my hand up to preach more at church so that I can get more comfortable doing that. I don't think the fear ever completely disappears, but you can practice, you can record yourself, you can improve. And finally, there was Robbie Brozin. Most people know Robbie as the co-founder of Nando's. But that wasn't really what the conversation was about. He spoke about Josie, my Josie, and one simple belief, that Johannesburg is indeed worth saving. And more importantly, Johannesburg can be saved. So Josie, my Josie is trying to bring businesses, organizations, and ordinary people together to take responsibility for rebuilding the city. Not just commercially, but start with the basics about safety and dignity and employment, and getting people off the streets, and creating an environment where people actually feel comfortable walking through the city again. But my favorite moment was when he brought it back to a constitution. He read through the preamble to the constitution, explaining what the constitution was about. And that was such an amazing communal moment as we sat and we listened to these words that are written in response to a government and apartheid that was oppressive, but it's one that looks to a future that focuses on our responsibilities that we have as citizens towards those who are vulnerable, towards those who are struggling.
We therefore, through our freely elected representatives, adopt this Constitution as the supreme law of the Republic, so as to, and this is our job description, heal the divisions of the past and establish a society based on democratic values, social justice and fundamental human rights. Lay the foundations for a democratic and open society in which government is based on the will of the people and every citizen is equally protected by law. And this is what you do incredibly well. Improve the quality of life of all citizens and free the potential of each person, and build a united and democratic South Africa able to take its rightful place as a sovereign state in the family of nations. May God protect our people. Nkosi sikeleli Africa. Morena boloko se jalo se Yesu. God save Africa. God bless South Africa. Muzimu fulatsi Africa. Hosi ketikisa Africa. That's the prayer.
And that brought together what I think was actually one of the biggest themes running through these entire 2 days: becoming a participant and not a spectator. You see, it's very easy to sit on the sidelines and complain about South Africa, whether it's the crime, it's our government, it's education, our whole communities, our economy, whatever it might be. But at some point, somebody actually has to get involved. And maybe there's something that bothers you. Maybe there's a problem that you keep noticing. Maybe there's something that makes you angry every time that you see it. And perhaps there's a reason for that. Perhaps God has chosen you to be the person that's supposed to do something about it. Maybe God has put that fire in your heart because there's somebody or some community that you're supposed to help. Whatever that looks like for you. You need to become a participant. Stop being a spectator. But for myself, I'm personally involved with an NPO called Family Health Foundation, and we work with children affected by drugs in areas like Nuclear and Westbury. Some of these kids are incredibly young, and it's difficult work. It's heartbreaking work. But if we're going to change our community, somebody has to participate. And that's my very brief summary of 2 days at Suits and Sneakers. I don't think I could possibly do justice to every speaker, everything that was shared. But hopefully I've given you a sense of just how awesome the event was. Mark, thank you again to you and to your team for bringing all of these people together. And until the next one, cheers. I swear that was not supposed to happen, that dramatic lights off. But so it goes.